Welcome to What Lies Ahead. I'm your host, Chris Ruffini, lead singer of the Long Island band Overthrow. On my podcast, I explore everything related to the hardcore scene through the eyes of artists, promoters, and record labels. As always, please like or subscribe on all social media platforms. What do a killer kangaroo, a coffin, and coffee have in common? No clue, but our friends at Knockbox Coffee are running with it, and somehow it works. From Long Island, Knockbox has a bigger vision, fueling creativity and giving back to the punk, hardcore, metal, emo, and underground scenes. Every band sold helps fund independent bands, shows, and festivals. Their one and only Killer Kangaroo blend is grown in volcanic soil within distance of the Amazon rainforest, sun-dried for 7 days and roasted in small batches in the US. Expect fruit notes and a dark finish, darker than your average medium. And it's grown and treated environmentally friendly. If you're tired of regular old blends, throw a punch at the ordinary. Try the Killer Kangaroo blend today. Give them a follow on Instagram at knockbox.coffee and get a bag of the blend at www.knockbox.shop. Now, on to the show. On today's episode, I have longtime friends and instrumental figures of the Long Island hardcore scene for over 3 decades, Mike Musilli and Anthony Race. Mike played bass for Crime and Stereo, Become One, and currently my band Overthrow. He is also a columnist for No Echo. Anthony Race is currently a production manager at the Brooklyn Paramount and worked in this capacity at Irving Plaza, the theater at Westbury, Huntington Paramount, and the Central Park Summer Stage. In the past, he booked shows, toured with various bands, and ran a record label. Today, we'll discuss the past, present, and future of Long Island hardcore. Guys, what's going on?
Yo, what up?
Hey, dude.
Thanks for doing this. So this is the first one of these that, in terms of usually I'll like talk to bands and have conversations with bands, but I know as a group, the three of us were talking about coming on and just talking hardcore. And we were like, you know what, let's talk Long Island. Like we go back long way, like 30 years, give or take, going to shows and stuff like that. So let's start first with each of you. I guess we'll start with Race. How did you get into hardcore? And then what was your first show?
With you in Plainview off the same tapes and same metal bands that we would go see. And from there, also working at a dry cleaners with Matt Cutler, who would also listen to a lot of like skate rock and guitar music, so to speak. So hearing both of those brought me to shows. I think I was a little later to shows, was more like early 94. I really started being able to go to more. It's probably some Roxy show or you guys in the cafeteria or, yeah, I think it was a Roxy show. It was one of those first shows where it was like all day hardcore bands, 25, Planet Freak, SOE,
Planet Freak, yeah.
You know, One for One, and to go on tension.
Mike.
So pretty close to with you guys, because when I was in like 9th and 10th grade, I was listening to a lot of like California punk, like Rancid, Operation Ivy, Pennywise. And then at the beginning of 11th grade, I had my English class with Dan, who at the moment, like early in that year, was like, he was wearing like Carcass and Fear Factory shirts. I was wearing Rancid and like Op Ivy shirts. And then he got into your band, and that really was the shift for me from like sort of punk and hardcore-ish in general to like, oh, I'm going to shows now. I would say like my first real hardcore show, I want to say sometime in like mid 95, 25 to Life and Tension at the Roxy. That was definitely the two bigger bands sometime in 95. Yeah. But it was through Plainview. It was through Plainview again. Like it was, you know, Dan was a metalhead, I was a punk kid, and then he got into Overthrow, and then suddenly we were hardcore kids.
And then from there, we all like kind of connected and then started going to shows. I remember together from there, we all kind of met and like Levittown, Plainview were you know, was doing that.
I
went to Bosie's with Lou, who Lou knew you guys and Dan also, and then we would see each other at shows and clicked.
Yeah.
I never knew that actually. I never knew you and Lou.
Oh, really? Yeah.
God bless. Yeah.
Yeah, that was good.
Funny about Lou is I actually knew Lou before kids because I brothers were crossing guards together. And then like 6 years later, it's like, oh, you're crazy now. All right, cool.
Yeah.
I'm into
All
it.
right. Cool.
Yeah.
And then from there, with all of us, obviously, it was like right 94, 95, give or take, and then it was just almost every single weekend. And then each of us kind of went to different ways with it. Obviously, Mike, you had the label. You were in Crime and Stereo. You become one later on, obviously. And Anthony, you ended up touring with bands and stuff like that. You were booking shows, and obviously, which led into a career for you in terms of doing that. What I guess to talk about now is there's a lot of different things to go with, but I guess what we could start with is where we started. And I think it's just looking at each era of each scene, right? So why don't we talk a little about where we started, a little that 90s scene, a little bit in terms of when we started going to shows and what that was like. So at that time, Mike, let's start with you here. What you think in terms of what that was like in terms of going shows and really the sound in terms of what was going on at that time.
Like again, like that my way into hardcore was through you guys and through Overthrow, really. Like, despite generally being a punk kid before that, my was thrown in the deep end of the heavy part of hardcore. So like really a lot of the first like hardcore bands for me, it was like Tension, it was Overthrow, it was One for One. And so there was an interesting contrast sort of going from like the epitaph California punk to diving right into the heavy end. But I think that was more about live. Like going to see a band like Tension live was an experience. You know what I mean? Going to see a band like Rancid was cool, but it was much closer to a concert. Going to see Tension, you're like, holy shit, this is like barely organized chaos. And like the confrontationalism of it was one of the most attractive things about it, where it was like, oh, okay, this really is like, you understand what hardcore punk is when you see those heavier bands where it's like, this is times 20, heavier, faster, more aggressive. And really, for me, I would say Tension, Indecision, One for One were probably, outside of course, Overthrow, those were like formative bands in like 95 that really was like, oh, this is awesome. I love this shit.
Mm-hmm. But you, Race, you think back with the 90s scene, starting when you
Same
started.
thing. We got all those tapes, as the VOD, Loyal to Non-Split, the Neglects, Horror Strucks demo, a bunch of those, and like you fall deeper into that side where it was, I guess, Tension, SOE, all those, the out east bands as we called them, right? Then, you found the New York stuff and it kind of like fell into everything, so like Sheer Terror was a big one for me off of that. Also because where in Plainview, Andy from Kill Your Idols used to work at a gas station with Chris, actually, and we would get his tapes, and he would give us other tapes. And Neil Rubenstein was also a big one who lived up the street and would be like, yo, have you checked that? Like, he told me about Mind Over Matter, which was like the whole other side of a coin that I didn't know was even there, because I was like, yo, Biohazard, like Madball, it's gonna be great, like, and I didn't even put the other two and two together until like I was like at shows seeing it, but like that heavier side of it, and the mosh and the energy and the chaos, and it was great, because you'd, like you said, you'd go to like a concert and you'd be like, this is a performance, this was fantastic, and then you'd go to Medford VFW Hall and be like, yeah, this is insane, like let's do that one again, let's do that one again, so that was fun. And then we'd have to book your band shows, so that's how we all kind of got into doing this and calling places and getting involved in putting our own things together instead of walking around the streets of Plainview and Hicksville. So
yeah, and I remember the shows booking in 96. So and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure the Hungarian Hall show in 96, the one with Shutdown, No Redeeming, Tension. I mean, there was just Motive, Kill Your Idols. It was a crazy
I think
show.
we asked 12 bands. We
12
like,
bands.
The band from, who was
bands.
that sick band from New Jersey that played? Oh my God. Wasn't
Tears
Crush.
from Frustration.
Not Tears of Frustration. I saw them at Deja. Oh, I wish I remember the band from Jersey on that bill. That was Uplift on that bill too?
Yes, I believe they were first. Tension, Indecision, Shutdown, No Redeeming, Overthrow
From that show, right?
Yeah, Kill Your Idols. I think everybody, we were like, yeah, let's
Yeah.
just get everybody to
That was,
play.
that was right. When you have 12 bands for $6, that was a
Yeah,
crazy.
that was a
Right.
wild day. No Demon just brought a keg in. It was fun. It's cool. It's a
Yeah, it was
party,
great.
but it was
So
just like a party with a bunch of bands.
right? No, it was. It was a lot of fun. That was, I think, Hungarian Hall's first show, right? Because you lived in, it was in
No,
Smithtown,
there
right?
were a couple of other shows
There was
out
prior to that.
there. There was a tension show out there, and then from there, that's how we were like, "Yo, let's try this place too," because we were already using like Dr. Shays, and like we were like, "Oh, there's other places to play." I think it was
Mhm,
because we couldn't get Shays that day.
mhm.
So,
And then from there, let's go like 95 to 99, just in because obviously with Long Island and what's cool about it is there's the heavier end of it that we're talking about. There's the fast paced end of it. There's the melodic end of it. There was the emo side of it, obviously, of all the different bands, and then there was the different venues that we could talk about at that time. The PWACs, the short lived Common Ground that didn't make the full show. There was Dr. Shays, obviously. There was Deja One. So why don't we talk a little bit about that? Let's talk a little bit about like going to shows at that time and seeing bands at that time in the venues at that time.
I will say, and I think you guys would agree with this, there was nothing VOD at the PWAC.
oh yeah,
Mhm.
Like,
that's
what's that?
that's the good one. Like that's the
Yeah,
top.
yeah. I mean, like
Yeah.
that's to me, that is like peak '90s Long Island hardcore. Seeing VOD to 2,000 people at in a warehouse. And it was what was kind of crazy about that too was like I don't know if this got like with you guys in Plainview, but like there was a weird turning point where like it was clear that VOD was a flagship band when like in my senior year of high school the football team came out to like DTO or something, and I was like,
Mhm.
fucking 3 years ago, you guys were like kind of dicks to me about having a blue mohawk, but okay, I guess here we all are type of thing. Um, and the same thing of like going to see VOD at the PWAC, and it's like, oh, okay, all the bros are here too. That's fine. But to me, that was like for the '90s in band and venue, it was VOD at the PWAC. But I think also we didn't. I didn't realize how special the PWAC would end up becoming when I
Sure.
was going there. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like I think that we were lucky enough, certainly me, I was lucky enough to get in there for about 2 years and see a ton of shows
Yeah.
and bands. And now, 30 years later, it's like that is the CBGBs of Long Island.
Sure. I remember we were trying to get them to play, you guys to play there. It was almost going to happen. Like,
And we had a show booked in
it
December,
closed
and then
down.
it closed
Yeah.
down. Yeah, it was like figures. It was our fault, but
And then, yeah, that was the thing too. We were like, "Oh, you guys gonna play the PWAC? That's sick." Like that was it because it was like playing all the other places and doing everything. And to get into there was awesome. You know, there from there, all the VFW halls, we definitely burned through a lot, like on Long Island. You'd
Mhm.
always wait for a certain person to be there and be like, well, this guy's going to have the battle of the bands, which was done for generations, of course, even before us, but like going and calling them and trying to find newer places to do that. And that's when like people found places like Deja, when like, which was cool, to be able to do so many shows and get involved with everybody that was there, like the swing set did a lot of shows during that time too.
That was a good place.
Cool
Swing
Short
Set
lived,
was
but
a
Beans,
good
really good
place.
spot.
like
Yeah.
Cool Beans picked it up. I think those were
Oh
more like
yeah.
later 2000, early aughts
But also,
too,
I think
but
I mean, especially the two of you would have to agree that Dr. Shays and Lindenhurst served a
oh,
huge purpose,
surely,
especially like on our end,
of
not to be
course.
any sort of way, but it was like that was a cool spot that I felt like I all had a little bit on lock because not that I felt displaced at the PWAC, but it was clearly the PWAC was run by people that were like up
Yeah,
here
there
and
was this
seeing.
whole other scene that was around that was
Yes,
here and
yeah.
like, Relentless played and it was dope, like
Dude, we
E-Town
saw, I
would
mean,
come
overthrow
play,
one for
like,
one in E-Town in a place with
yeah,
50
like,
people. Like,
and it was like, that was the best shows that we ever had there. Those were so fun.
so
It
fun.
was the
So
best. And the
fun.
best one,
Yeah,
the
it
best
was.
thing about that place was you would call, they would just give you the place from 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock. like on Saturday, maybe a
Was it
Sunday.
really that simple? That's crazy.
It was that simple. You'd call, you just book the day. The guy didn't care. They would charge $5 to get in, and to your point, Mike, like you'd have bands like that on there. And I even think you remember going back, Sheer Terror and Killy Rydell's played there,
Oh, that's right.
yeah,
That's right. Two Man Advantage played there.
yeah,
That's
like
true. Yeah, they had some
big
legit
bands
shit there.
played there, and they would give you money back at the door to pay bands. They were really good because that place would pack out. They would overfill the place, by the way.
Of
There'd be like
course.
200
Of
people in
course.
that place, and it could hold 50. And but I agree. I think that place, because there was when after the PWAC closed and the common ground didn't work itself out, there was a little hole for a while. Like there was VFW walls, but and then Deja One came in like 97. And so Dr. Shays was like that place for a little while for a lot of bands.
It was a strong stopgap, dude. And also like just a great place where no one really had to worry about like, am I going to fill the room or whatever? It was just like, if you had 5 bands that could play the same day, like Dr. Shays was good to go.
Especially if it was Overthrow, Perception, and Relentless, because that was a group of 25 kids from each of those sects. That was just
half the
there
bar's
we go.
filled already.
Like, that's it.
Yeah, that was fun. So quickly talk Deja One a little bit, because that place, it's not the PWAC. It definitely isn't. It never will be. And I agree with Mike. I think you just said it. It's didn't realize how, we knew it was great going, but you don't realize now how great that place was. Like, when you're in it and you're young at that point, you don't, and you realize just the amazing shows that went on there. But Deja One held Long Island up for a little while. Like I remember Deja One every show would be basically crowded almost at that, and like a lot of big names came through there. So let me talk a little Deja One before we move on to the 2000s.
Ray, start it off, bro.
So yeah, Deja was dope. Mark Noyes brought me into that also. There was a bunch of people doing shows there, and we all became a little group out of that world. The Rich Hall also put a lot of work into those shows over there. He would give us a bunch of bands that wouldn't be playing out here. I think I booked Bane there because of him. Botch, he did there. A lot of those bands, that weren't in our usual sect of the same 7 bands that were playing all the other shows. So that grew to so many kids driving down Old Country Road in that 5:30 p.m. traffic to get those doors open for 6 o'clock. And it was fun.
Yeah. I mean, so Mark brought me in too, right? Mark Lopez, shout out to that dude. And
you booked a show there too, didn't you? Sorry, Mike.
What's
you
up?
booked a show there. You booked us there.
I booked a bunch of shows there, too. I mean, I think where like if we were looking at sort of the structure of hierarchy, race was more consistently embedded in like sort of working at the venue where it was like Mark brought me in and was like, you want to do shows, just let me know. But I didn't. And I think honestly, this is a nod to guys like Race and Rich Hall and Mark. They just had more wherewithal of how to run a show, where I was still on the tip of like, I'm going to book my favorite fucking bands, but then I'm also going to just be at the show rather than running it. So it was like, I was probably a little bit of an annoyance to you guys with that. You know what I mean? Like, you guys were the ones checking money, making sure shit was straight. I was just having fun booking shows.
Along with, of course, Christian. Christian is the integral part of my story too, of getting into this world, because him and I would just continue to go on to do this still, to this day. So he would bring in so many bands that, we didn't know. And it was all like the handed down worlds of Long Island hardcore, of all those folks that brought those folks.
Down played there. System of a Down played.
Definitely did that.
Yeah. Alex and I were literally laughing about that a couple months ago about like, do you remember when McKnight called us to fill a room for this band System of a Down, and everyone was like, this band fucking sucks, and then it's like, 30 years later, multi-platinum artist, wrong again.
2 nights at MetLife,
Right. But I do want to say this about Deja One, and I think this probably speaks to you too, Race. Like, despite me probably being a little too young and not quite understanding exactly and precisely how to do things, what I learned from guys like Mark and Christian and Rich Hall and you too, that was the type of shit that was allowed me to lay the groundwork for at least my vision for Crime in Stereo early on, where it was like, this is how you book shows. This is how you conduct yourself as a band. This is how you understand that, like, yes, this is hardcore, but there is a certain level of business appropriate that has to go on. And a lot of that, for me, a lot of that came back to observing and being a small part of what you guys were doing at Deja, where it's like, okay, I got some like work experience here too.
Sure. Yeah, getting the hands-on experience running our own shows at such an
Yeah.
early age was fun as hell, you know, and understanding all of that and getting yelled at by people like, "Don't you guys know what you're doing?" We're like, "Yeah, totally. We're gonna be great." Like, you know, like bands like Nile that would walk in and be like, "Where's the PA?" And we're like, "That's it." And they're like, "That's it." Nah,
Somebody forgot something.
yeah,
But
that's
also,
not
like,
it. Like, you know, like,
I mean, you would have to argue that might have been some of the shows for Overthrow. You know what I mean? Like, that was just a stopgap venue, like Bouncing Souls, Sick of It All, um,
yep.
Glassjaw, like so many big bands went through there. I mean, I remember
Earth
seeing
Crisis,
Harvest
H2O.
there,
Yeah.
Hot Water Music played there. So it was like, I mean, that was a legit venue
Yeah,
with like,
it had a good run, you know, like because you know we I think also running it that way, you know, like it was like cool, we can kind of keep this going here for as long as we can until we ruin another venue, you know, because from there would be like the Molly Blooms, but like earlier in the 90s, you know, late 90s, you know, but it would be hard to go find other places at that point too, because they'd be like all ages shows or you know there's no
Yeah.
bar money, so nobody wanted to do that. So we would either do them from like 12 o'clock in the afternoon to 5 p.m. at like that place Revolution in Smithtown, you know, like or some other random bar that would let us do it.
I wanted to ask you something quick about Deja One, then we'll move. You know, we'll get into the 2000 scene because the music definitely shifted. I think the sound shifted a lot on Long Island with it, obviously, and a lot of big bands came from it at that time. But you mentioned bar. I would at Deja One. If we weren't playing, I was there on Friday or Saturday nights. That's usually, you know, if we weren't playing somewhere else or playing there, I would go there a lot. We played there a lot. I was there a lot. You know, like I do. I've never been in that basement down there. Right?
Really?
I've
Oh, it
never
was
been in that
awesome.
basement.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love
What
the
is in that
basement.
basement?
It was a little bar and office because it was, you know, a Portuguese like Legion Hall, you know, and they had a little room down there where the five guys that would run the
yep.
venue, you know, would kind of hang out and, you know, have their shots and listen to us dance around on their floor for $400,
That
you
must have
know,
been loud.
and or, you know, yeah,
Yeah.
wasn't great sometimes for them.
Mhm.
But you know, some of them were really cool, you know, and everybody had a different role in, you know, keeping those guys at their, you know, hey, this is cool because there were some shows there that were very crowded. So we would
Yeah.
go down and hang out with them sometimes and keep a good relationship in the basement, you know.
What
But
kept it
yeah,
going?
that's where we would go and like, you know, separate the money and that wasn't in the co check. Figure out how
Mhm.
we all right, we gotta pay this band, we gotta pay Glenn and the sound, we gotta pay for the dressing room stuff, we gotta pay for the fucking graffiti that, you know, half of them wrote in the bathroom.
One great new
We
front
gotta
page
pay, you
bathroom.
know, like we gotta pay for, you
Yep.
know, like the everything from there, we gotta pay the bands, you know, and like we gotta pay for the flyers for the next 32 shows, we gotta pay for this, we gotta like we figured out how all of that ran.
So talk, I guess, a little. I mean, you could go. I mean, look, that was really the prime of obviously us going to shows. We could stick in this era forever. And I know we talk Deja a lot, and PWAC. You know, I think we all agree is like the cathedral of like it is the CBGBs of Long Island by far. Like PWAC is the CBGBs of Long Island. Like that's the best way.
Nothing comes close.
Yeah, nothing comes close to the PWAC. As much as we're talking Deja, it's nothing even remotely close to the PWAC. So let's move shift to the 2000s. You know, and I remember when 99 going into 2000, and that's really Deja shut its doors around 99, and then the swing set was there, but then Long Island Zoo. And I'm going to keep pushing up forward as we get later in the 2000s of like Crazy Donkey. And there was a place in Smithtown in a basement, Black Backstreet Blues. There was so many different like
Oh
venues in the
yeah.
2000s. But what I recall, and you correct me if I'm wrong, guys, and we'll talk about the sound on Long Island kind of, I thought changed a little bit more. But it was like there was a lot of like brand new and like then and then just other bands just started really building. It was getting more of a melodic kind of sound. And I remember Glassjaw blowing up and getting really big. There was a lot of people really trying to like find that Glassjaw kind of sound as well on terms on the island. So why don't we talk a little about the 2000s? Like it's a long decade to stretch, but the venues, the bands, and all that kind of stuff at that time of the 2000s. And Crime and Stereo, formed around that time, or a little after that time as well.
I think if I'm trying to accurately sort of trace that, what some would call an emo explosion, I would call it more of like an alt rock explosion on Long Island. I think it comes back to who it always fucking comes back to. It comes back to Silent Majority, right? Who, will be the first to say they followed the Mind Over Matter blueprint. And really, the blueprint that Mind Over Matter set for fucking everybody was, yes, hardcore has a sound, but like, we're gonna play what the fuck we want to play. And I think, Silent Majority did that too, where it was like they definitely are a hardcore band, but they didn't check the box of like a youth crew band or a heavy band. They were sort of playing their brand. And I think when you look at even like Clockwise, similar thing, right? Like they were just playing what they thought hardcore was without necessarily having to keep to any sort of like paradigm. And then when things start to shift, Silent Majority breaks up, Clockwise breaks up, Mind Over Matter's been gone for a minute. I think a lot of the kids who were musician minded that were going to shows and seeing those bands had started to take their instruments up. And like, there's a logical progression from a band like Silent Majority to the Movie Life to Brand New to Taking Back Sunday. Taking Back Sunday, obviously a little bit different because you have Eddie going way back in the scene too. But still, I think there was like a sense that like, if we're going to follow that paradigm of not necessarily having to sound like anyone or anything, and we're going to take what we see as the most impressive aspects of what had sort of died off just before us. A lot of it came back to that sort of clever storytelling lyricism of Tommy, but like, the melodic guitars of Rich, and also like the sense of just like, we're gonna do our own song structure that comes out of like the Mind Over Matter Weebles thing. And I mean that shit just, I mean it just lit the world up when you look at how quickly bands like Movie Life, Brand New, Taking Back Sunday, Glassjaw they didn't just get popular. Those bands
Yeah.
went like
Yeah,
fucking
they
major
made the
label,
culture. Yeah,
national. They redefined things. You know what I mean? Um, in retrospect, there was a reaction to that. I think appropriately enough, like because that one would underlie this, and Race, this, like that fashion core bullshit that was bubbling
sure.
beneath the surface with these bands. Like I'll tell you, I fucking hated it. I thought it was stupid. I thought it was commodifying hardcore in the worst fucking way. I thought it was passive aggressive in its antagonism. But I also think the way some of us reacted to that created great music too. So I
Sure.
think it was it was a fucking boom in the early 2000s coming off Long Island. It was like nobody is New York's younger brother anymore. This isn't just
Yeah, they
about the sort of,
definitely had a
yeah, no more off center. Oh, they're melodic from Long Island. It was like, oh, these bands are commanding your attention.
Long Island had the perfect, like, because of Silent Majority, the melody and the aggression of all the heaviness from the other side of those bands, like a Neglect, as mentioned,
Right.
Attention, like Mind Over Matter, all created this thing for everybody to spill off there. And that bubble that came out of those bands that were going to see them burst over in that time, and created a culture and created jobs and created careers and created things that are, now on 25th anniversary tours, like and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
for that, that's pretty cool, and to be part of all of that world, from booking a hardcore show to booking a sports plus show to booking a different level of concert experience in there and watching each sound kind of go. the fashion core world, was another sect of another scene out of every part of every scene here, like,
Yeah.
and watching them all coexist was cool because every show for a little bit also had those 200-300 kids again that were just around for whichever version kind of popped up. But that melodic aggression of the Long Island sound in the early 2000s got everywhere. And
Yeah, it went everywhere. And not for nothing, like my antagonism about fashion core aside, one thing that is undeniable about those bands, I see you smiling on this,
love
right?
it. Yeah.
The point is though, and I'm always quick to say this, all that stuff aside, even this sort of soupy alt rock wrapped up as third wave emo, whatever, all those bands still started playing hardcore shows. Like, yo,
Sure.
man, I booked a show at the Belmore VFW in which Brand New opened and 25 to Life headline. You know what I'm
Sure.
saying? So it's
I
like,
remember. Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like Movie Life, one of their first tours was going out helping, supporting Silent Majority. Like, so
Sure.
it wasn't like these bands sort of came up out of nowhere and took it by these were
Yeah, like all
legit.
these kids came seeing those bands and just
No,
found their own world out of it
yeah,
and would still circle back to whatever that
yeah.
is.
Yeah. They will put on for younger bands when they had hometown shows or like
Sure.
if they could. Like there's no denying that, even if I wasn't impressed with the part of culture they created, but they
Sure.
did do their thing.
Sure.
Mhm. Talk maybe some of the venues at that time. Now, and then I'm gonna like let's span it that whole decade. Like I said, I did mention
Ground
some, but
Zero.
Ground
yeah,
Zero.
Ground
Ground
Zero,
Zero
yeah,
had
Ground Zero.
million
Ground Zero. That
shows,
was late '90s. Ground Zero, like didn't like I
Yeah, was
remember having
that
Christian on here. The Ataris played there, right? I mean, that's insane.
Dude, Newfound
yeah.
Glory we saw in front of what, 50 people race?
Yep. Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Is that the
I mean,
Long
crazy.
Island Zoo?
Stretch
I remember seeing
Armstrong
a bunch
played
of
there.
Stretch Armstrong, yeah.
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 Yeah. It's great. Like the Long Island Zoo ran it strong for a little while too. You know
Yeah.
yeah, that went. I know I'm jumping in like maybe 5 years later with Crazy Donkey, and
It
it's
was the
funny.
downtown. The downtown
Downtown.
brought,
I'd say
Downtown
a
downtown really,
thousand
yeah.
different kids, because
Yeah.
again, all those bands getting bigger, it was bigger than just a Lindenhurst South Shore thing. It was like everywhere now. Like, like
Yeah.
these kids were everywhere.
I drove past the downtown.
Downtown actually was, I forget that. That really was legit.
That
Like,
was the first like real venue I worked on. I was like, this
yeah.
is a bar. Oh, you guys
Prime,
redid the stage. That's cool.
Prime and Stereo opened for Stretch Armstrong and H2O there. I saw
Hmm.
Bane there. I mean, that was a legitimate venue.
Yeah,
I
that was
mean,
LOA's
popping.
reunion show.
You
LOA when they
this,
Yeah,
came
you
back,
guys
Mark
played
Magadan
there.
played there.
yeah, you go.
Yeah, like
Silent
with
Majority there when
Uh,
Silent, I forgot who, their first reunion shows in 2005
yeah,
were
with
were
Millhouse was
down.
there. Yeah,
Millhouse was
you
there.
know.
Yep. Yeah. That was
Um,
a legit venue.
Andrew
But also
WK and
like,
Sky Came Falling. They played there.
oh shit, get here.
that's cool.
I
That's a
would
cool
say
show. Yeah,
also like,
that was a
are
good
we
spot.
race? Are we like past the local seven, or is that still in that moment there?
That's a little later, right? Isn't that like
It is a little later. Okay.
2002, 3, 4, maybe? Right.
Okay.
I always get a blur from there because at this time I was also on tour, right? So
Right.
I would be out with earlier in the
Right.
2000s, late 90s, Sky Came Falling, and then from there Atreyu, so I would come in for like 4 or 5 months a year, like, hey, what's going on? Cool. I got these shows here. You guys got these shows. Christian's booking these shows. I got to work these shows. I'm going to run these shows for him. Oh, he's got 3 shows in one day at some less than Jake at some random church in Belmore, and so
Yep.
running around doing
Yep.
those.
But yeah, I
Yeah,
think definitely downtown held down for the good stuff. I think local seven definitely was great for local bands to play, even though it didn't quite pan out the way everyone had hoped it would. Really, like it was one of those things where you were
I
gonna just
lost
have to
the
figure
most
out a
money.
way.
If I was doing a local 7 touring show, I was like, great, here's $100. I'm just losing $100 here because like it just wasn't like the band I'd feel bad for. Like, oh, they're just looking for a place to play. Like, I can get 3 bands to bring 20 people,
Yep.
like, and it would be,
Yep.
to kill for. And
But it still
uh,
it served its purpose,
yeah,
you
of
know?
course, like it would do it, like it would bring a lot of other bands and other scenes together into other places where you would find other groups of people.
So then,
Backstreet Blues too, not for nothing, right? I mean,
Sure.
I played a bunch of
Basement
shows with
Labs.
Blood Red there. Pro
yeah.
Max played
Coheed
there.
played there.
Coheed, yeah.
Um, everybody starting line, something corporate. We carried
Yeah.
I
that
thought
dude's
Kobe
piano
played.
down those stairs. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Small brown brown. Oh, those
Um,
goddamn stairs.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
we did a lot of stuff there.
Yeah.
There
So
was
let's move.
that place went through three different names too, Backstreet Blues. Then it was like Vibe Lounge, like
Oh, that's
Oh,
right. And what was the other one? It was
like
like 30 below or some shit like that.
yeah, it
Something
was
about
something like
being
that.
cold
Like,
or something. Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't even remember. I was like, I'm out. I'm out. I don't know, man. Like, good luck. I hope you guys do great.
So it's like you hear you guys like you're talking about this stuff, about the shows booked in the '90s, what you were doing in the 2000s. Specifically, we'll talk with you, Race, and then obviously with you, Mike, too. You were talking as well. You were booking shows, you were doing stuff. Then Crime and Stereo got started. You started touring with them. Race, you were booking shows, you were doing stuff that you started touring like a tour manager with Sky Came Falling. You said you went out with a trio that eventually led to where you are today as a production manager, obviously, in terms of what you're doing, which I do want to talk about. But let's get into the 2000, like the tens area, right? Like, that in terms of venues, like that still were there, the shows and bands and stuff like that were getting bigger. Like late 2000s was Incendiary started going, and then they started taking off in like 2013 and all that kind of stuff. So let's talk that era of Long Island hardcore.
Yeah, from the two late 2000s, I would end up working for like Reggie and the Full Effects from Under Ashes.
yeah.
Uh, do some Get Up Kids runs in the late aughts there. And then also working at all those venues for shows that we were doing in the area. Then I would go work for the Paramount in Huntington, where that's just a different level of shows while still trying to like be like, I'm still a hardcore dude. I can help with the hardcore show
Mhm.
here or there. Like, and dip into that world from there. Incendiary, Backtrack, Subterfuge, like that whole world coming out of that side. And it was kind of like dead a little bit, it wasn't bopping, and I mean, I was a little out of it too. I wasn't as young, and hardcore being the younger kids, I'm sure there was 50 bands out there playing, but I didn't know about them at that point. But they kept going. So,
Mm-hmm.
so.
And same on the end of like it was so especially like 2008 to 2010 was a weird moment for me after I quit Crime and Stereo. I definitely took a year completely off of just like I was burnt out by the vibe. Um I was disenchanted with a lot of shit. Frankly, in retrospect, I was also embarrassed by the fact that like I had to leave a band because I couldn't keep up with how well they were progressing musically, even though they won't say that because they're very nice people. But I will say this, and the names have already been mentioned. Backtrack and Incendiary. Incendiary started in 2008, Backtrack around that same time. What those two bands did as both people and bands was like an absolute shot in the arm, reinvigorating Long Island. Like those dudes, and King Nine was another one of those bands. Like they had the
Sure.
Sayville Republicans Club, where it was a cool upstairs room, probably fit 150 kids. And when I finally got over myself and started going to shows again, it was clear like those dudes, like, Vitalo and Audley and Dan from King Nine, those dudes had not just sort of picked the flag up, they almost sort of reinvented how people saw Long Island for a while because
Yeah.
they were bringing bands like Foundation. They let Terror know that Long Island could be a home for
Yep.
them. I mean, they legitimized that sort of thrashy sound, that metallic sound that had sort of it wasn't there for a lot of the early 2000s. Like you had bands like From Autumn to Ashes that were like steeped in the metal sound, but not doing it the way Incendiary did it. And you had heavy bands during the
Yeah.
early aughts, but not the way Backtrack was doing it. And like I remember going to one of like I don't know what fest it was, but I remember going to a fest and I want to say it might have been an Ethical Humanist, but like those kids had chosen the lineup. And they had like one of the things I think what got me there was a Trip Face reunion. It was really Scott and a bunch of other dudes, but it was still awesome. But seeing those young bands like Backtrack, K9, they brought Foundation up. I want to say Have Heart Played. It might have been a little past that, but like I remember walking out of that show like, oh shit, like Long Island hasn't gone anywhere. Like
Yeah,
that group of kids, and those kids are still down to this day. Those kids really made sure that like Long Island stayed on the map, and they put their own imprint on it. To be honest with you,
sure. Yeah, I would pop in, be like, "Oh, anybody want to play with Soul Control?" And I'd ask Capital and back, I'd be like, "You guys know Hardcore Kids, right?" Like,
yeah, yeah,
because like I just wasn't as in tune. But everything I would say, I'd be like, "Oh, this is dope." But
yeah,
I was also watching all these kids come up in other bands because I was doing sound at these clubs during these like
yeah.
daytime things. So I'd see Ricky from Backtrack coming up and like things he was, and I'd be like, "Oh, this is dope. These kids are all growing into like." Something, and to like see them also now turn their lives into careers into
Totally.
stuff is crazy, like so like it was still there, and but like I wasn't as in tune with it. And then I felt the whole scene kept going by that King Nine world, the incendiary world kept growing and made their whole other name for themselves again in Long Island,
Yeah,
in that time frame, like even with the things Crime and Stereo was doing, again, waving like the flag going across the musical spectrum of Long Island at that time again, still having a melodic feel of that early late 90s aggression we were talking about before, that melody aggression, but keep going in every direction for them.
and you know who I actually think did a great job of picking that sort of melody that you're talking about, uprace, especially in that time? Iron Sheik. I
Sure.
think
Yeah.
like
Well,
they would
the
the
agent,
agent, yeah,
agent.
exactly.
I always like,
Also,
I
like
put, yeah,
first run for cover record ever to come out of
yeah,
Agent. Now they're putting
you
out
know,
AFI shit. It's fucking trippy.
yeah,
But like
like
that
that
first,
band. I always think like was like another band that like circled me back and being like, there it is, like because
yeah,
again, I was, you know, as involved as I was in a industry doing things,
yeah.
I was still like, there's this business side of it, and then there's like, oh, I want to do this for fun again, like and be around. Like this was way cooler.
Agent
Like
was sick though, man. Agent
sure,
was like,
yeah, they were
you know,
dope.
when you
Like
look at bands like Turnover and Title Fight and how big those bands got, and it's like, fuck, man.
sure,
Agent was right, coulda, woulda, shoulda. But like, yeah, I mean, I think Iron Sheik coming up around that time too was like they were doing something else for sort of like the more punk, punkified hardcore that also kept things together where,
sure,
Incendiary and Backtrack were doing, the heavier stuff for everybody too.
sure.
Mhm. You know,
With one band we didn't mention yet, it's kind of fucked up, is Kill Your Idols.
yeah. Oh my
Kill
God.
Your Idols is probably
They are like
most
one of the most
the
influential.
most
Yeah.
important hardcore
They're
bands
above all of
for me
this.
ever. And they at this point too were still something that was lore before their other reunion. Because of their last shows were so crazy. I remember like going to the Smithtown, for that weekend, and then heading out to a flight for tour and not going to the parking lot because
The
I'm like,
parking
I
lot,
gotta go
yeah.
to fucking whoa, I gotta get to the fucking airport because we're going somewhere. Like, I'm like, oh fuck. And in hindsight, I'm like, do I wish I didn't go to the airport? Should have went to that thing, but that was
So you
that
want to
was
talk
scary.
about band like so I do think like yes, obviously like it's criminal that we didn't get to them, but also like they are a transcendent band. Like,
Sure.
I
Yeah.
mean, people across continents have Kill Your Idols tattoos. But to also speak to something about them beyond the music, like that's it when I sort of talked about how like Race you and Mark and those dudes at Deja One, gave me an education in that place. Andy and more so Gary and Brian. I mean, those
Sure.
dudes taught me also how to conduct myself about being in a band. You know what I mean? Because
Remember
one thing,
working with them at
well,
Merchsterette, dude.
Mercer,
Like, yeah.
working with Brian every day was a
I
fucking
mean, I would
vibe.
only
Like,
pop in, but when I was like home, like, can I do a couple of like, oh, it's holiday season, can I do some shifts? But like the whole dynamic of that world was great. But like Gary and Brian, yeah, it was fun.
yeah. But I mean, what was great about them was they, even to this, they do it to this day, 30 years later, like they make sure they are hooking up the younger bands.
Sure.
Like the the first real release I was ever had my name on was this fucking split with Kill Your Idols on Blackout Records. Like that's fucking chef's kiss. You know what I
Sure.
mean? And it was really just like, you guys want to do something with this? And we're like, fucking yeah, we
Sure.
do.
Of course.
You know?
You know?
But like they almost get like the shit end of the stick because you presume that
Yeah,
everybody
they're
knows Kill
just
Your
up
Idols.
there. You know, it's
Yeah,
them.
that's
Like, you know,
yeah,
like fucking,
yeah.
you know, from that first week and driving to CB's for them to record the demo, you know, to like, you know, even now it's like
They just, even I
watching them.
remember seeing them at that show at CB's was with like Cause for Alarm and No Redeeming. They were just, new bands. Sometimes it takes new bands to find their way into their sound. Like they
Oh,
had their sound, they knew what they were doing,
They
and they were
reignited a sound, you know, like they
yes,
yeah.
reignited
I mean,
like
yes.
everything, you know, like
Hardcore
and
punk. Yeah.
yeah, like Andy, like again, would like show us stuff and like do things like that, like you know, and be like, "Yo, to check out this band, check out that band," you know, like, and then be like, did you go to that Grateful Dead show?" You know, and I was like, "No, I didn't go."
yeah.
Thanks for the Minor Threat sandwich. You know, like you
Mhm.
know that tape's dope. You know, like, but like yeah, they reignited a whole freaking world for the hardcore punk for
They're
me
great. Great.
especially.
Still great to this day. They
Wild.
got some stuff
Wild.
planned in the new year too, which is going to be cool. So
Yeah.
So let's talk the 2020s, I guess, which and we'll talk the new AMH, which Scanlon and the newer bands that they're new. Some of them have been out five years now, but now like, and I know if I don't want to miss any of them.
Scanlon
Oil,
generation, did
Pain
you
of
call
Truth.
it?
They are they've been around. You forget Coyo's been around for a few years, and then this band
Yeah.
is blown up. And they're also, and I've had a lot of these bands on here, like, and they're great. It's like, and what's great about us too is what's different too with the scene. So it's a lot of things too with like the scene we'll talk about now, and the venue of AMH and Scallon and how they're booking things and going about things and the new bands. But it's also, and it was funny. And it hit me, and it was Gary said this on here. And Tommy Corrigan said this on this podcast also when we were talking about it. Is if you remember back, we were talking about the 90s and early 2000s. There was no 45, 50-year-old men walking around, and if they were, we'd be like, "What the hell is that? And who are they doing here?" You wouldn't see that. Like if someone who was 23
Yeah.
years old, 25 years old, you'd be like, "Oh my God, they're older." Now it's just a mix of everything, and it's just super cool. And I think Long Island now is just even as big as ever, to be honest with you. So kind of set a big picture of the 2020. So why don't we talk 2020? So why don't you guys talk about what Long Island hardcore is now, the venues and everything like that.
It's a traditional growth of another flag bearing generation, you know, like of the the Koyo, the standstills, you know, like the things that are grown, like Iron Cheek still doing it, you know, like those bands obviously, you know, keep the Long Island sound going with their melody. But I think that AMH does a great job, you know, keeping a central place. You know, I don't know as many other places on Long Island that aren't doing anything. Like if somebody's like, there's a show on Long
Massapequa, right?
Island. It's like
Massapequa
at
VFW,
AMH,
which is cool
bringing
that they
us
do that still. It's
to
cool that they do
that
it.
bringing back, you know, of like, oh, keeping that, you know, DIY culture alive in that, you know, there's a VFW hall with a little bar. It's cool, you know, because it's fun. And there's a brewery that does big shows, and that's fun. So those places are still going, you know, like there are bands of all the musical spectrum still going, you know, there's a St. Hood Reps still goes, right? You know, so that world is always popping.
Yeah, I think I agreed with everything you said about AMH. It's run well. It's a great venue. I think kids who have gone to shows in the AMH era are probably not going to realize how important that venue is
Sure.
until if and when it's gone. Because I mean,
Yeah.
if you remember, I know Race, I know you know this. When that place was the Village Pub South, it was like, don't fucking play a show there because somebody's going to try to
Yeah.
steal your fucking cabinet.
Sure.
And what Dan and those
Well, we
dudes
did a show
did.
at Copeg VFW around the corner, and we got robbed. So yeah,
Yeah, so yeah.
pretty much.
But so like what Dan and those dudes did to take that over, hardcore kids, doing the business model to keep it together, I don't think we quite appreciate, how important that is. And that like we are back to getting national touring acts, and that all goes
Sure,
through AMH. I think the nod to Mass Peak was it's cool. It's a cool nostalgic vibe about like the VFW thing.
sure,
I do think Shaker's Pub, for all of its clear problems,
sure. This is
also
a good place. Hey,
it
we
served
need
its
them.
I mean, dude,
Yeah,
Backtrack
Drain
record
played
release
there,
there was
right?
sick. Hoyo
Didn't
Church
Drain play
record
there?
release they did. What's that?
Drain played there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
yeah,
So like,
Imagine
and
that
then
now.
Coil did
Yeah.
two night record
sure.
release there. Regulate is played there. So I think, Long Island's lucky to have consistent venues. I think in the 2020s, it's fascinating to me how, like, as you say, Chris, like I was when I was listening to the Corrigan thing, it was interesting how we turned that age thing into a math equation, and it's fucking true. Like, I
Yeah,
remember at Deja when we were young, like when he was talking about like that Pete the Punk guy. I don't know if it was the same guy, but I remember there was a guy at Deja that would come in with like a Village Voice or a Long Island Voice newspaper, sit in the back and like sort of watch the bands
yeah.
and then
That was
read his
him.
newspaper. Okay, and like that dude was a fucking unicorn in
Yeah,
1997, 98, 99. Now, I mean, dude, we're all, God bless us, we're
it's
pushing
us.
50, and it's like,
Yeah,
it's like that. Nobody bats an eye to get to my point. It's like, dude, you talk to Jerry from Standstill, any of the Koyo dudes, like those younger heads are all fucking chill. And I think in a way that perhaps I certainly wasn't, I didn't have the wherewithal of those dudes when I was younger to like
Yeah.
be talking to guys much older than me, because I don't think we had the opportunity to do that. I don't know if that's true across the world in hardcore, but I do think there's something about Long Island hardcore that makes it so chill where everybody can be that way, because it's just like if you're down, then you're down and we're all
then you're
good. Doesn't
down.
really
You get
matter.
it. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. But I think like 2020s, man, like, dude, I know Standstill's probably not doing a bunch of stuff for a long time, but what a tremendous band. Koyo out
yeah. They
there
were
waving
dope.
the Long Island flag. Pain of Truth is like, Jesus
Yeah,
Christ, biggest hardcore band on the fucking planet. Michael Smith can't think of a better ambassador for Long Island hardcore, let alone hardcore alone. Um,
dope.
yeah, dope. And like also like still have like cool, interesting bands on the come up. You know what I mean? I'm for Ill Wind, Riley's band, like
Yeah.
people
Yeah,
are
Ben is
putting
very
out,
good actually.
yeah, putting
They're
out
good.
demos, like the Stress doing that cool fucking Oi vibe. Like it's as good as it's ever been. And I think
10 years out, that yeah, new,
10
right? They're great. Like you
part of
just,
it,
yeah.
so with into the 2010s into the 20s reminds me of something George Reynolds said to me way probably 25 years ago. I had interviewed him right when Earthling Massive started, and he said something to the effect of hardcore remains alive. Hardcore is functional because of the straight edge kids. And at the time, I was like, no, I kind of get that. But then you see dudes like fucking Scanlon and Riley and these kids, like even in the mid aughts with Vitalo, like that sort of second subculture within hardcore,
Christian,
like
you know.
Christian, there you go. Yeah. So even right, there you go. Like Tommy, like through all his shit, it's like that second layer of subculture, like really does do something to keep shit together. That
Sure.
like whatever's going on in those kids' minds, it really like, God bless them, because I don't have the ability to do what any of those guys do. And maybe straight edge is causation, maybe it has nothing to do with it, but I'm always reminded that George said that decades ago, and it's like through the tens and twenties on Long Island, it couldn't have rung more true.
Sure.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. If you look at the AMH show, is the mix. It's a great mix. You have the bands that, and a lot of that's great too. It's like, you see when Silent Majority comes back, except what that was amazing that weekend they had in March. It was just such a great weekend for Long Island hardcore. But when they've come back and have had their reunion shows, it's all new bands. They've honored all the new bands. I love that. And Scanlon does a nice job of mixing the bills. I think he does a really good job of that. And I said this to him on here, and when I've talked to him, I think his temperament for it is perfect. It's perfect.
Yeah.
That dude's got stuff coming from him, all different angles and all that kind of stuff. And he is so just chill. And, like we're like my band, we're playing next year, we're putting a show together. And it's just like, I can't imagine how he does that. He's got like 50, 40
It
shows.
takes a certain
It's crazy, you know?
it takes a certain type of crazy to be able to.
Yeah, and they're doing a great job. And AMH, and I agree. And it's nice there's ownership in there within Long Island Hardcore.
Yep.
So you just hope that place just runs its course forever. I think it's such a
Absolutely.
great venue for Long Island. It really is. And it's a place that
And
people want to come through and tour and play.
exactly. And even like the full circle shit, like Silent Majority, playing there, Capital playing there, Kill Your Idols playing there. Like we're gonna get a
Inside.
Weebles show there, Inside
Yeah.
playing there. All of these bands that laid groundwork in the early to mid 90s can not only see, the perhaps unintended fruits of their labor, but also like, fuck, man, you're still fucking relevant, man. Like I think that's a beautiful thing on Long Island that like kids will come out and respect the history of what the island has done, for hardcore music. I think it's
Sure.
it's a fucking beautiful thing, bro.
Mm-hmm.
It's the best culture I was ever a part of.
Yeah, it's
Amen, dude.
awesome. And that's
Amen.
so within this conversation, what I want to talk is a couple more things. One, it's kind of like the bands that mattered, kind of what you guys have been doing, what you've learned from it, and then we'll end off with. I always like ending off with questions that I throw at you guys, and you have to make a decision on them. So that's like kind of where I'm going with this. So why don't each of you will start and race? We'll start with you here. The most influential, and you guys kind of mentioned it. We've mentioned it, but like now, when we just went over all 3 decades or 4 decades or so of 3 decades of Long Island hardcore, the most influential Long Island hardcore bands and why?
Personally, right? Like to me,
Yes.
right? That's what we're
Mhm.
doing here.
Mhm.
Kill Your Idols, of course, because they opened up a full separate world of driving to CBs every weekend and just having a different part of the world for there. Tension, because they also, to me, opened up a whole other part of the world. Just making friends with people like on the other side of Long Island and just having a different group of people for music to bounce off of. Sound Majority, of course, come up into there. Mind Over Matter is
I was waiting for
probably,
you to say that. I was like,
my
I'm
my
like, when's that coming?
my a big one for me.
Mhm.
You know, then from there are a whole bunch of things that I felt are always underrated, and I just go back to because of my time capsule of that world. The Motive Record, Trip Face, Millhouse is all these bands that were bigger for us in that generation. Garden Variety, turned into one of my favorite Long Island bands out
A
of
good
that
band.
world. Like,
Great
um,
band.
yeah. I can keep going because all of these bands to me meant so much. Like,
Ever seen Garden
and
Variety?
finding so many things.
We saw Garden Variety. It hit me I live in North Shore, Glen Cove. So in Seacliff, they used to play. It's an elementary school cafeteria. There was hardcore shows that went on there. We saw
Hmm.
VOD there, but we also saw Garden Variety there.
Yep.
I just find it amazing that there was a hardcore shows going on at an elementary school cafeteria in the 90s. I just think that was just, I mean, and what's crazy about that place was my son, he's 15 now, but at the time, like 10 years ago, he would play basketball, or like 8 years ago. And I'm into school and I'm like, why does this look super familiar? He was playing in the gym of
Yeah, I bet.
that
Oh, that's
school. And
wild.
it's like, I went to hardcore shows at this school. It's like, you typically wouldn't see that, So that was cool. But Guard Variety, yeah, they're a good one.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go on forever with all those bands. I mean, so many of them,
Mhm.
can go. Like for everyone that I'll name is going to bring another one to my
Another
head.
one
That's
up.
like,
Of
Yes.
yo,
course.
this is
Yes.
it. Like, that's the one. Like without them, I'm not. Like,
Yep.
but like, for that world, all those bands really, they still got it, man. They're just
You
great.
do.
Yeah.
When you put on stuff on like that and you still love it. Like it's
Yeah,
still,
it's the time,
yeah.
man. It like
Yep.
bridges so many other gaps that, like, like I'm gonna pop the
Yeah.
Low Magnus 7 inch on, from those
Hey.
early thing, would be like, oh, this reminds me of driving to Brian Parker's house, and like does a whole other generation of things.
Yep. Mike, what about you?
Okay, so obviously there's a lot of overlap with Race and I because coming up together, so similar things, but definitely tension in like again, going back to what I'd said to open, like that was the first band where I was like, man, these motherfuckers are crazy and scary. And like to me, that was
So cool.
invigorating. And it was fucking cool. Yeah, it was fucking cool. Like that demo where they redid, what was the fucking cover? What was
Oh,
the
the
cover
Go-Go
song?
song. We got the
Yeah,
We
beat.
got the beat.
we got the
We got the
fucking
beat,
like
right?
it's
Yeah.
like holy shit. And Mike singing it the way he did. So
But on
like
top of all that, right, guys? Like they were. Because
oh dude, they live that shit. Like that's for sure. Like that
we
I
were like in 11th grade at the time. They're so open and
Yeah.
just like talking, that they were the best.
dude, it was yeah, that's what I'm saying. They were a force to be reckoned with,
Mhm.
for sure. I think obviously Kill Your Idols as well, sort of as what I said, like not just musically and opening things up, but also like what those dudes taught me about conducting myself appropriately in a band and a lot of the sort of ethics that underlie what I think is most meaningful in hardcore really comes back to guys like Gary and Brian especially. um, Look, silent majority is there are,
They are.
as much as you almost want to leave them out of the conversation because it's so obvious, you can't, especially on my end where like, musically, Crime and Stereo is trying to fucking rip off Silent Majority without being so obvious. Like it just was what it was. And then like as Crime and Stereo is sort of doing their thing, like working with Tommy was like it was such a fucking trippy thing because also he would like take me aside like a big brother and be like, listen, like when you go on this fucking tour, act appropriately. Like this is how you conduct yourself. So he also culturally, taught me a lot of shit. So definitely those bands, but I gotta go with another band who, while technically not from Long Island, are absolutely a fucking Long Island hardcore band. Indecision.
Oh, okay.
And
Okay, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, of
seeing
course.
them as often as we got to see them, how
Sure.
how approachable Tom and Justin and those dudes were from day one. And their version of heavy still is original today as it was when they were doing it. And their lyrical content, like the socio-political shit that they would write, like really elevated stuff with me. So I have to say Indecision there, um, as well. And then like almost less musically, but more just like crazy factor. Dude, seeing Artie Philly play live was like a master class and like
Oh
just like
yeah.
holy shit, man, this dude is like off his fucking rocker, doesn't give a shit, and like just the most confrontational. So like again, like obviously upsetting the milk is top tier LIHC, but also just like to have been able to see that dude like sort of when he was doing his thing, I got to put Millhouse in there too.
Hmm. Yeah, great. They
Sure.
were.
Yeah, that indecision and indecision and shutdown were our first like friends out of trading
Yeah.
Right.
shows and like being
Yeah.
like, think these guys will come out and play here? Yeah, they're already coming out and playing here. Like,
Right.
let's just call them again. Like, oh, we're gonna do it here this time. Like, and it would be fun. And they definitely brought like from there it was like CR and like all so many other
Right.
bands that were
Right.
like falling into like the laps of us. It was great.
Also, Long Island hardcore band. I don't care that they're from
Yes.
Staten.
Yeah. Of course.
They are a
Yeah.
Long Island.
100%.
CR is a Long Island.
Yeah.
So
It's all the
you
same team.
mentioned Race. You actually mentioned you answered this already, but there's probably a couple of others. So I guess we'll start. We'll start with you with your Race. So underrated bands that never got their due, and that could mean they broke up. Maybe they ended early. Could be a lot of different factors, but underrated bands that never got their due. And it doesn't have to just be the '90s, by the way. We could kind of look at let's look at the last 30 years of bands that maybe some that were like, wow, like I thought that should have took off a little more than it did, or they never had the
Um,
chance to take off.
that's crazy because I've watched so many of my friends' bands do well, So uh, it was hard for me to like really think about it. So I'm not gonna lie. Like I mentioned Motive before. I feel like Motive should be way bigger conversation for some of these kids, and I'm
They
sure
come
it
up on here
is.
all the time, by the way,
In
all the
these
time about
younger
that. Yeah.
generations, I'm sure that kids do their homework. It's a lot easier than it was when we were kids. Like they can find all these bands a lot quicker. And then there's bands that I forget about. I'm like, oh yeah, that band was dope. For me, the underrated bands that I like always go back to putting on are like SOE. They were one from like our early '90s generation that always I thought like were so fucking cool. But I was in love with Life of Agony too, so it was like the same thing for me. I was like, oh, this is extended Life of Agony. From there going up into the late '90s generation had 1,000 bands that were always trying to be around, and doing relentless shows was always to me really fun. I mentioned them before, and they were underrated at that time, I thought. And putting it on now, if I put it back, I'm like, oh, it might not feel as good as it did, but like to me, I'm like, time and place, man. It's just the memory
Yeah, time and
is
place.
just there.
Yeah.
But more I think about bands that I thought were underrated that like just didn't get their due because it just wasn't the time for them, was like bands like we said before, like Garden Variety, like Half Man, things I fell back into, after finding the whole world of this. Outrage was a big one for me,
Yeah.
um, like bands that like on Long Island are good, but like I hope that like everybody feels for like I want everybody to know about Capital. That band like held so much, it brought people back. Blood Red, that whole, Tommy's catalog. Like outside of Long Island, I hope people are like, oh, that's sick. Um, shit, yeah. That was a tough one for me to be of name these underrated bands because I just didn't remember because I've done so many of them, or I'll have to like go through my iPod ADHD and be like, oh yeah, this holy cow, oh my god, listening
iPod.
to the 7 inch, like did the 160 gig was strong.
Mike.
We're saying underrated.
Yeah.
All right. Um, so just because they came up already, I think Agent was so well ahead of their time and so clever that they really should have been the biggest thing in the world, and just what for whatever reason weren't. Probably also a little biased there because I think the people in that band were like awesome people. I loved Keith, whatever he's doing now. Love that dude. Glad that most of that band went on to do stuff in Somerset Thrower and all that stuff. But they were just great dudes, great fucking sound. Keith's lyrics were sick. I loved them. Another band that comes to mind more in the early to mid aughts for me was Thieves and Assassins. Um,
Dope.
Dope, fucking
Yeah.
dope. They had a great sound. It was like, Duncan had this very Dave Smalley thing going on, but they were, like a great melodic but truly hardcore band. Um, and I lament that I don't hear their name as often as I think they deserve to come up when people are talking Long Island hardcore history. I don't know if they were underrated. I just think they were sort of confined by their own members. Sons of Abraham was fucking crazy and like super awesome. I loved the couple of times I got to see them, but like, when everybody else was doing other shit, it was like they were sort of destined to never really do much. But I love the Sons of Abraham stuff, to bring it back to something in the 90s. But I'll say this, I think to this day, Mind Over Matter, ironically enough, might just always be the most underrated Long Island hardcore band because no one can do what they did.
No.
They are the influence of the most influential and romanticized band in the history of Long Island hardcore and silent majority. And it's like they were like, I mean, like you put those records on and like you could tell someone it came out this year because it's still so original.
Sure.
And they get all the love in the world, but still I think just like from a musician perspective, it's just like those
Yeah, so
dudes
it's
were
like
just
outside of Long Island, like do these bands feel that? Like I don't know if they feel
that's
that because this is me, like
exactly, dude. Exactly, dude. Yeah.
So I guess we'll end with this question, and then we'll end with you guys choose it between questions. So I guess Mike, we'll start with you here. What did, after 30 years of being involved in the Long Island hardcore scene, you've had bands, you write for No Echo, all these different things. What did being involved within the hardcore scene mean to you personally, and where you are with your career professionally as well?
Um, you know, it's easy. I can say this confidently now, I'm 46 years old. Like hardcore has, especially Long Island hardcore, has defined my worldview in terms of how I conduct myself, what I think matters in the world, what I think matters to me, not just as an individual, but for my family. What I think makes good relationships, why I think music is the greatest gift that we've ever given ourselves as a species. It's not just hardcore, it comes back to Long Island hardcore, really, because like it's fucking it's just crazy, man. It's crazy that I love it as much now as I did when I was 16. The love is very different, but the strength of that love is unwavering. Like, I fucking love what hardcore has provided me. Really, like, I really do. It is. Dude, I went out to dinner 2 weeks ago with my buddy Bear and his wife Marta. They're from Germany. I met that dude 20 years ago on my only European tour, and I'm still friends with them to this day because of fucking hardcore. Like, that's a blessing. That's like it's fucking weird. How it's impacted me as a professional, I think for me, I got into hardcore for very traditional reasons. Like I did not have a place in my high school. I was a fucking weird kid. Um, didn't make a ton of friends, and hardcore let me know that my world is not just my high school or the town that I had to grow up in. It's much bigger. You guys played a huge role in that. Like when it was like, all right, like Overthrow's playing in Jersey and we're running 6 cars deep and realizing like hardcore isn't just this little pocket niche thing on Long Island, like it's everywhere. Um, I never forget that that was my inroad to hardcore, feeling out of place and feeling like I had a ton of friends and then finding all of those friends I think is why I am very insistent on in my job, like you gotta love everyone. You gotta let people be who they are. If you find yourself with a ton of friends, you're blessed. But kids that come through my halls or my classroom like that don't have that, you know, if I'm an adult that can help them find that, whether it's music or whatever it is, I think that's something that hardcore has taught me is like the normies will be fine. The normies are always the normies. If you're paying it forward or paying it back the way hardcore intends all of us should, you look out for those other kids.
Awesome. Race.
Yeah.
Civilians. Long Island Hard Tour was the best thing that we ever found, because it, for me, not just my career that we'll go into, it showed me another group of people in my high school that weren't going to raves every weekend, and I could go, oh, I don't want to go to the raves. I'm gonna go to the show. This is cool. And then I would kind of sect off with these L Town kids and these West Babylon kids and this whole other group of people that would kind of become my best friends over the years. And I would see, like he talked about being blessed at shows, seeing so many people and being able to hang out on a regular basis, like every other weekend or every weekend, and being able to then tour with some of my best friends and hang out with so many people that I was lucky to now work with one of my best friends still too. Christian, took us into a whole other world of promoting and doing concerts, and it's not like doing hard tour shows anymore. But I get psyched that I get to put on an event where 2,000 people are psyched to go see so and so, and they're happy. It may be a long stressful day for somebody because every day I do somebody's big New York show, and that's like one of our sayings. It's like, oh, New York's a big city, big show, big day. And every day, we got to make sure that people have a good show and they have a good experience. And that's my paying it forward of like, cool, this is like somebody's got a shitty week, but they were able to come to this concert and they're going to be happy at the end of this. And it's on the backs of all of us putting on these shows because we enjoy doing that for somebody else, you know? So that's how like I look at hard tour, because other people were putting on shows for somewhere for us to go rather than walking around the streets or doing something else. And then leading into other things and, you know, watching, you know, drugs take over other people's lives and other things take other people's lives. But there were those straight edge kids that like every weekend were doing the same thing. And I was going to go eat the same fucking plate of fries and, you know, same thing at the diner, you know,
Diner at 1 a.m.
or, you know, like, so, you know, for me, you know, that made my career, you know, into still being involved with music, you know, and still being part of, you know, something for somebody else.
Awesome. Yeah, it's awesome. It's cool too, Race. Like you're talking, is like you were talking in the beginning about shows you were booking and all that kind of stuff back in the day. And it's like obviously like all those things you learned each year, and then tour managing and all that stuff to where you are now as like a production manager and all of these like these big major venues and stuff like that. It's super cool, you know?
Yeah, I'm pretty lucky, you know,
Yeah.
to start from the ground up, you know, and like there's an industry like, you know, you learn something new every day, you know, and it's a constant thing, but like I like it, you know, it's still fun to be able to, you know, work in music and, you know, still listen to hard tour demos and be like, ah, this band's cool, you know, like,
Cool.
and then
So
go to a show on Long Island and be like, look at all these kids, this is cool, you know.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
also go into a show Long Island, and this speaks to the to why Long Island hardcore really is the greatest thing that ever happened to us. It's like I can go to a show. I may not even know all of the bands playing, but it's like if I got nothing going on and I'm feeling some sort of way, I just want to get out of the house. You could just go to a show on Long Island, and you know you're gonna know a couple people there.
Yeah, you're
Where
gonna
like
run into somebody.
you're gonna run into somebody, you're gonna kick it for a couple of hours, whether you're watching the bands or not. And I think that community aspect to Long Island hardcore, it's like you can't match that shit. Like in your term, civilians, and mine, normies, like those motherfuckers don't have that. And
Yeah.
I don't begrudge them for not having it. It just makes me understand how much more blessed we are for having it.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So towards the end now, I have a bunch of questions you guys have to choose between. A lot of them are albums, and then just like usual, there's no semblance of order of how I do this. So that's the best part of it. So we'll start Race. I'll start with you, and then we'll go and like, you know, then Mike, you answer it. And then obviously if you want to explain why you can, we could go from there. So we'll start with here. Everything you ever wanted to know about Silence or Worship and Tribute?
Um, everything you wanted to know, because that those demos and being around those shows and, you know, doing black books with them and Daryl, and, you know, it was just a different time for that. Like that Worship is a great record, but like, you know, everything for me was more of a time frame piece.
Mike?
Worship and Tribute, largely just because like it was the most palatable of anything the band ever did that I liked. Um, you know, wasn't the hugest fan, great people. But I think Worship and Tribute had a couple of bangers on it that was like, oh, I could get down with this. And also very fucking cool layout.
Yeah, that was a cool layout, that album.
Yeah.
All right. Back to your Race. Funeral for a Feeling or No Gimmicks Needed?
Um, no gimmicks needed, you know,
Mhm.
time and place again, you know, they were playing like every weekend when No Gimmicks Needed came out. So it was like every time I would be home or pop around, that they would have a show and I can go see them play those songs, you know.
Mhm. Mike?
No gimmicks needed. I mean, for the same thing, it was like they were just fucking killing it every goddamn weekend with that. Also,
Yeah,
like helped sort of bring Blackout Records into the modern hardcore era. Like everything that was going
sure,
on with Kill Your Idols around No Gimmicks Needed. Unstoppable.
sure.
Unstoppable.
Mhm. Okay. Let's get a little crime and stereo here, Mike. I know we'll start. I
Okay.
apologize with Race here. The Troubled Stateside or Is Dead?
Um, Troubled Stateside has a lot more of the shit. Yeah, Troubled Stateside, I'd say, you know, but Is That is a great record, and you know, a lot of them, the growth of watching them, you know, and Mike come from To Kill For and to go to Oneonta and see like then play for the weekend, and then they'd be like, "We're
Yeah.
playing a hot tour show," like it's gonna be great, so to watch them grow into everything they've become, of course, is for me, troubled state.
Mm-hmm. Mike.
I mean, and I've been very honest with the people in that band who are my closest friends to this day. To me, everything that I ever thought Crime and Stereo should be is embodied in the Troubled State side. That is to me their opus. Alex is a tremendous musician, and it's impressive that he's able to take that band in so many directions. But the socio-political content of the lyrics and the
Yeah,
sound, it's I mean, I Stateside is like a fucking perfect Long Island hardcore song.
Well,
So it's
yeah.
got to be Stateside for me.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and to be weird because I've loved you guys all for so long. Not that I thought it was like, oh, there's like Crime Stereo pre-Mike, and then there's Crime Stereo post-Mike. Like that always to me
Yeah,
was
yeah,
like
yeah.
a different thing. And again, I love them both because like, hey, that's it, but like the trouble for me was more of like what I thought they were going for at that time was dope.
It's in 20 years next year, right? Yeah, that's great. That's insane.
Crazy. It's
That's
fucking crazy.
crazy. That's crazy. All right. So, and you only can pick one, and for both of you, favorite silent majority song.
If he
Life
picks the
Raft.
one I want, does that mean I got to pick a different one? This motherfucker's
No,
already thinking. I can tell.
you could
Yeah, no,
go.
other like
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
I don't know. It goes back around, man. Like, Life Raft was always one because I thought it was so funny. Like, just a good riff and just the way he
Yeah.
delivered that one was good. 3 o'clock Solitaire is probably up there, or AM, like something off there.
Mhm.
Uh, I can name 5 other songs and be like, yeah, this is gonna be my favorite one. But now it's this favorite one. Like let me put the record on, then I'm gonna tell you why all of them are my favorite one. Cross Crowded Rooms, of course, is like Cross Crowded Rooms is probably it. Yeah, I'm gonna go Cross Crowded Rooms too.
Mike.
I mean, obviously we know Polar Bear Club is the anthem, so we'll put that aside.
Sure.
New song. I fucking love new song. It's like one of the most clever anti-war, like militaristic violence songs. It's subtle, it's melodic. I don't know that I've ever seen them play it, but I fucking love new song.
Okay. So I've asked this before, but I've completely changed one of the albums with VOD here, just because. Why not? Like going to another era here. So how about Imprint or From Bliss to Devastation? Grace.
Imprint, of course. Like
Mhm.
it's funny because Eddie White will be like, "You're gonna say From Bliss to Devastation," because when it came out, there was like I was like really into it, and then like it fell off a little bit. Didn't have the same ferocity as
There's
what
some good
people
songs on
say,
that one.
But
There
yeah,
is.
the record rips, like.
Mhm.
And again, they were like another band that was so important to me that I'm like everything they do to me is good in some way, like
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
but Imprint hit a little differently than the other one.
Right.
I'm gonna say Imprint only because I remember it better than From Bliss to Devastation, but like yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I was nearly off them even just after the Green record. It was a little far from my style anyway, but at least with Imprint, like I remember it a little bit, but yeah, I gotta go with Imprint.
Yeah, Imprint. That was a good one. It's funny how when that album first came out, I remember because people love to rip VOD like they always did because a lot of it was jealousy. But now you look back, people look back at that album, it's like classic. It like made new metal, and you hear about like everything that it did for all these bands and stuff like that. That is a really good
Was,
record.
Oh
was
yeah,
Imprint still on Roadrunner? Was that a Roadrunner
Yeah,
release?
yeah. It was
yeah,
their
Was
yeah,
last song,
was
Roadrunner.
was and Bliss was on TVT. That was the first, or maybe
yes.
only. Okay,
Yes,
yeah. So
yes,
definitely Imprint. Yeah, I just want to make sure.
Imprint had the Phil Anselmo song.
yeah,
It was
which is
heavy.
cool. All right, Brace, 40-hour train back to Penn or this time next year?
This time next year, it was a bunch of bangers. That band. Watching them sell their demos and then going to Rev, Long Island band on Rev. That was like sick. They're on Revelation. Um, yeah, this time next year. The another flag holder and bearer
Oh,
of the
yeah.
Long Island Sound. You know, like
I'm gonna agree ultimately with Race that it's this time next year, because I like that sound overall. But the song 40 Hour Train Back to Penn is might be my actual
one of their
favorite
good
movie
It's a
like
great
songs.
song.
song.
Yeah.
Such a good and just like what they're talking about and all that shit that they went through. Also, shout out to Caruana for still doing his musician deal to this day, man. That dude is hustles, man. You got to respect what that guy does.
Lifer, you know.
Life,
Yeah.
straight up lifer.
The talented guy. He is.
Oh,
He
yeah,
really
he
is.
is. He works hard.
Um, I'm going to allow you to pick a couple other songs here because it's so ridiculous asking someone to tell you their favorite song. But favorite Mind Over Matter song? Yeah. Race.
Oh God,
You probably
too
have a bunch of them.
much.
You know.
Hectic think. Too much is probably it. You know, hectic thinking. God hates me. Uh, Fucking all of voter manipulation. You know. Yeah, too much is probably that's that's it.
Mhm.
I would say probably hectic thinking if I had to. Also, I haven't listened to the band in a long time, so now I'm just sort of going with the one that popped
Oh
into my
man,
head.
I probably listen to too much, like once a month.
Attaboy.
I'm just
Attaboy.
stuck in the past.
No,
You
Race,
know,
you're a
like
big,
I listen to the same
biggest
Not at
Mind
song
all.
Over
every
Matter
day.
guy. You know, everyone loves Mind Over Matter, but like you're the biggest one I know, like for sure. You probably,
There
Yeah,
you
because
go.
like
probably have
they were
one
one
right
of
now in
like
the background.
Yeah.
they they totally like found from me like a whole other world of bands, you know, that were out there, you know.
They
Yeah.
sounded. I mean, the last time we saw them in Brooklyn where we were watching. They were sounding great.
Yeah, they still
They sound great. They
They
really do.
sound tremendous.
sure.
So we talked bands here, but I'm going to specify it here. I'll go back. We'll start with Mike here with this one. Most underrated Long Island hardcore record.
Ooh, record. Interesting. Um, it might you fucker. I would say two names are coming to mind. I think the Trip Face record,
Mm.
because it was so limited in its pressing, and that record for me when it came out, it was so fucking good. Again, like, technocracy and all the shit that Scott was singing about. I wish more people have heard that. I don't know if that makes it underrated because, like, I know the three of us don't think it's underrated because we fucking loved it, but that comes to mind for sure. And then I think of this more as like a cultural thing, like what Race has said, like you hope other people know about it. That first Otmont record, that first On the Might of Prince's record, I'm forgetting the name of it right now. But I remember when that came, Where You Are and Where You Want to Be, I want to say it was. Um, Seeing their shows after that record came out, like you want to talk about a band that just made people happy and feel less alone. What they did with that first record, and then they went on to Rev and did some great shit. And I know it just got the reissue treatment, but I think underrated only in my concern that like that's a record that should have. I hope more people internationally, nationally know about that first On the Might of Prince's record.
Mhm. I'm glad they came up too, because there's so many
Yeah.
bands, and it's like I hope
So
we hit
many
everything.
bands.
They're
So
another
much.
one. They're another
Yeah.
one. You know. Go ahead, Race.
I'm gonna say three bands. And you know, I forgot the name of the record, which is probably awful on me. The Subterfuge, the
Oh yeah.
Backup
Good
Plan
call.
record,
Good call.
right? I think both of those bands, you know, built a scene, and you know, were always, you know, had their own, you know, the pockets of scenes that were around, and every like couple of months, these Venn diagrams would always hit at a big show, and it was always really cool. Um, and then my own biases, Sky Came Falling 1021, you know, because, you know, when they put that record out and they were traveling a lot and they were touring a lot around that record, you know, it was always like one bad break after another bad break, bad break. And then like finally now, you know, people are now all over taking that record back in, and has always left a mark for me because that was one of the first bands I toured with. You know?
Mhm. Oh. All right. So, Mike, favorite incendiary song?
Oh, Jesus Christ.
They have so many.
Um,
They really do.
Might be Zeitgeist, maybe. I mean,
Song.
I'm gonna go with that because it's the first one that popped into my head. But again, like another band, I love Brendan's lyrics. I love their guitar. And why I'm not overthinking it. Go with Zeitgeist.
Nice.
I'm not gonna overthink it.
Race.
I don't know every name of every song, but is that the product is you?
Oh, it's a good one. Yeah,
That one,
that's a good one.
I don't know the
Yeah.
name because I'm corny.
Mhm.
Those are like another like band I put on, like like just they're on, like I don't know the names, I don't know anything. I just watch their live show and their world just go crazy.
They've always been a band to me. You put them on, you hear it once, and you felt like you heard the song 45 times. Like they're just so
Yeah, it's
catchy.
fucking catchy.
They
Very
really are. Even
familiar band too.
Like the hook on the new album. Well, it's not new anymore. It's 2.5 years
Yeah.
old. That song too. It's just they're great. Obviously, you can see how I feel about Incendiary. I think they are what they've done to influence what's going on now is just it's incredible.
Yep.
So favorite. This band too is super super influential here. We'll start with you, Race. Favorite Neglect song.
Either Harsh Struck or LSS. I'm saying both of those, because the songs were on tape that we got when we were in 10th grade, ninth grade,
Yeah.
10th grade.
It was on
And
that tape. You're right.
again,
I know exactly the tape you're talking about. Yeah.
yeah,
We would
it
get
was
those tapes, and
VOD,
that was
Loyalty
like, yeah,
None,
had that on
Neglect,
there.
Mind Over Matter was on it. It was just like a Long Island,
Yeah.
hardcore tape, that we were like, this stuff's really cool, but like we didn't really know about it, like how do we find more? And then VOD would start popping up everywhere, and from there it just bubbles. Yeah, that's it.
I'm gonna go Pain Principle only because God forbid they did something melodic. So I'm with Pain Principle, but you gotta give it up to LSS for like some of the craziest lyrics you could present to a 15-year-old kid.
Yeah, it
So
was unreal.
love that.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I'm going Pain
Unreal.
Principle.
All right. Two more, and then we're done here, guys. You keep going on and on here. And it's like, again, I'm trying to hit all these different bands. You hope you don't miss it. Favorite backtrack song? Mike, sorry.
Oh, Erase the Rat. Love that fucking song. Erase the Rat, my favorite backtrack song.
I'd really have to dig it back on that. I love the was it Deal with the Devil 7-inch. I like that
Deal
stuff.
with the Devil. There
Deal
you
with the
go.
Devil's
Fuck
pretty
yeah.
good. I'll pop that 7-inch.
Okay. So this is the last one. And we've had a lot of these over the years, a lot of reunions, but a Long Island band reunion that is needed. For at least for you. Go ahead, Reese.
Well, it's happening soon. It's Clockwise. That to me
The
is
boy got
it.
his wish.
I feel like so many bands kind of pop in and out, that we're so lucky that we get this
True.
culture's, comeback. I'd love to see Blood Red play, I don't know if that'll happen, but that would be cool. But, yeah.
Cool. Mike.
Blood Red.
Yeah, right?
He said it. I mean,
Yeah.
again, like I love all of the reunions that have happened and that are continuing to happen. I think it's a great thing to help bridge the historical gap. But I mean, give me
I
that
missed
entire,
Dearly Departed's reunion last
yeah,
night.
the other night, right? I mean, give me a Blood Red reunion, please. Like that Redwood Records EP is just like,
Fantastic.
dude, it's fucking
I would
flawless.
say it's like this. It's a great fall record for me. So as the leaves started changing on the walk to the
Yeah,
train, I'm like, oh, this is
heck yeah.
perfect.
Clowns Above, also, but like Suburbia off of the Hostage
Yeah,
record. Like, yeah, give me that Blood Red. Give me that Blood Red reunion.
Cool. They come up a lot here too. Look,
yeah.
these questions are for you, but I'm going to answer this to end with. I think for me, and I think there's some other people out there too. I'd love to see Trip Face. So
Oh,
I'd love
same,
to see them come
Sure.
back.
Yeah.
The original band,
same.
that would be
Yeah.
that'd be great to see them. They talking about them though, and they were getting huge. I mean, they were huge, man. Like they were. If you put that Common Ground show on the PWAC that they played, their response, that was their last Long Island show. And then it just would have been interesting to see where they would have gone. And then they ended, unfortunately, in 97. But I would love to see a reunion with them. It'd be cool
It
to
was
see.
always cool going to see them on like what they would play one of those wetland shows. It would be like,
Oh,
like
yeah.
Long Island
Ah,
band,
the
Yeah,
Sweatlands. Yep.
Yeah. So had to end with that. So thanks, guys. Anything you want to end with before I sign us off here?
Dude, thanks for having me, man. I love talking this shit, and I appreciate you both for really being pivotal in getting me into this whole thing.
Well,
Same, man. Again, yeah, happy that I got to make so many friends out of this world. And, this is like the same kind of conversation, like we said, that would be like, we're just before we got in our cars and we started going off on rants on everything that would be like, remember this and how about this, so it's great.
Yeah. Awesome, guys. All right. Hang tight. I'm just going to sign us off and then we'll talk up after we're done here. Thank you for listening to What Lies Ahead podcast, which is available on all streaming platforms. Go save the What Lies Ahead podcast playlist on Spotify that features all bands that were on the show. For more information on future episodes, you can go to my Instagram account and follow at What Lies Ahead _podcast and on Facebook by searching What Lies Ahead. See you on the next episode.